A towering figure of Hollywood's past, had a career that stretched from the silent film era of the 1920s to the American New Wave, marking him as one of the most enduring stars of American cinema.
I'm going to tell you something, Flacca, and I want you to listen tight.
Born Marion Morrison in Winterset, Iowa, Wayne would come to define an era that became synonymous with rugged, larger-than-life roles that captivated audiences for decades. For over 30 years, Wayne was a leading light in the industry, symbolizing a particular brand of American masculinity and starring in some of the most iconic films of the Golden Age. However, as with most revisionism, the light of retrospect often uncovers new perspectives with which we regard icons of the past. Numerous instances have emerged where films, musicians, actors, and directors have been revealed to be problematic, their actions or works brought into question through the lens of time. John Wayne was politically incorrect in his day, which means today he is the most unwoke actor of all time.
Indians, maybe. Maybe so.
At face value, he was the larger-than-life cowboy, only 6 feet 3 inches, and the embodiment of modern American ideals, a poster boy for grandmothers everywhere. He starred in Stagecoach in 1939, and The Searchers in 1959, and famously played cantankerous, one-eyed U.S. Marshal Rooster Cogburn in the original True Grit in 1969. He even directed and starred in the Green Berets in order to support the U.S. war effort in Vietnam. At first glance, the John Ford-directed Stagecoach and other Western films of its era may seem like proactive contributions to the American movie scene. However, a closer examination by the Hollywood elite reveals more complexity. As the late film critic Roger Ebert noted, these films were often unenlightened at their core.
I hit a lick against what...
So, what's wrong with Wayne's Westerns? Directed by John Ford, who worked with Wayne on The Searchers and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Stagecoach reflects a familiar aspect of American culture, exceptionalism. The film portrays the Apaches as little more than savages without addressing the historical reality of European settlers invading Native American lands, leading to a prolonged period of destruction that began with the arrival of the Mayflower in 1620. At this point, it might be easy to forgive Wayne for starring in such films. Some might argue that it was just how things were back then, or that people didn't think about those issues at the time. After all, on screen, Wayne embodied the quintessential American ideals, and one might ask, what's wrong with that? Others might contend that the Western genre was simply meant to be entertainment, a sentiment shared by many. Of course, there can be no doubt that Wayne was a captivating and talented actor. However, it was his actions off-screen that caused the problems with the liberal media and wine-sipping historians. Regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, Wayne was an American conservative in the truest sense and used his stature in cinema to advance their causes. The Green Berets came about as a result of this. The film was his successful attempt at rallying support for the ruinous Vietnam War. But where should the line be drawn? It's true that everyone is entitled to their own political opinions, and it's a democratic right to campaign for causes considered just. During the height of the Cold War, when tensions shaped much of American life, John Wayne became a symbol of the democratic American fight against the perceived threats of communism and the Soviet Union, a situation that became blurred regarding his personality and persuasive nature both on and off the screen. Wayne detested communism so much that he played a significant role in creating the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, MPA, in 1944, and was voted in as its president 5 years later in 1949. Although the alliance was officially disbanded in 1975, opponents' accusations of racism and fascism were thrown at it. Ronald Reagan, Walt Disney, and Clark Gable were among the alliance's members. Even Ayn Rand wrote a pamphlet for the organization in 1947, which criticized what she saw as subliminal communist propaganda in some Hollywood films.
Can I talk to you now about another much publicized aspect of your life, which is the sort of political views that you hold? I'd like to particularly ask you as well, because it's related to the film industry, about that period in your career in Hollywood when you were to the forefront of the people who were blacklisting the alleged communist members of...
Well, that's not a true statement.
Well,
we were not blacklisting.
Well, you were.
They were blacklisting. We didn't name anybody. We stayed completely out of it and said, "We are Americans, Anybody that wanted to join us was fine. We gave no names out to anybody at any time, ever.
But when you look back at that now, John, at this space of time, I mean, are you proud of what happened in Hollywood at that time?
I think it was probably a very necessary thing at the time, because the radical liberals were going to take over our business.
The people who got kicked out of Hollywood, surely they were.
Who were kicked out?
Well, the people.
Now, wait a minute. Tell me who was kicked out.
Well, the people who left Hollywood. Let's take, for an example, Carl Foreman.
Yeah, Carl Foreman.
I mean, was Dalton Trumbo?
Carlton Foreman, Dalton Trumbo.
Look what happened to Larry Parks.
Larry Parks admitted that he'd been a commie, and he went on working.
Well, he didn't work for some time. They'd had a very...
Well, he hadn't worked a hell of a lot before that, had he?
Well, no, but I mean...
No.
But I mean, these aren't people, surely, are they, who you would expect to take over the industry?
Well, at the time, it seemed rather serious. And they were getting themselves into a position where they could control who would do the writing.
Wayne was so anti-communist that he emerged as an ardent and vocal supporter of the infamous House of Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC. In 1952, he made the political thriller Big Jim McLean, where he starred as a HUAC investigator hunting down communists in the organized labor of post-war Hawaii. This demonstrated his support for the anti-communist hunt and offered yet another blurring of the lines of reality and fiction in Wayne's life. These personal views also meant that he became a known enforcer of HUAC's notorious blacklist, which denied employment and destroyed the careers of many actors and writers who had expressed personal political beliefs that were not in line with HUAC's. This saw directors such as Sam Wanamaker and Dalton Trumbo blacklisted for un-American activities. Other members of the MPA who testified against their peers were Walt Disney, Ronald Reagan, and Ginger Rogers. Wayne was also an ardent supporter of the chief architect of the Red Scare, Senator Joseph McCarthy. Wayne became so world-renowned for his proactive anti-communism that allegedly Soviet leader Joseph Stalin said that he should have been assassinated for his views, even if the Russian leader was a huge fan of his movies. The Stagecoach star even joined the far-right and paleoconservative John Birch Society in 1960. However, he left after the organization denounced fluoridation of water supplies as a communist plot.
Well, I think I've established in this country that I have a love for it, and the fact that I am well known, I suppose, has some power for the Republican Party, but I went out for Mayor Yorty in our town. He's a Democrat. I went for Governor Olson when he was Democratic governor of California. I vote for the man.
To some, Wayne's political commitment might be seen as a strong personal conviction, even if it meant advocating for war or damaging the careers of his peers. However, a more troubling moment came to light in 2019 when his 1971 Playboy interview resurfaced, revealing deeply problematic views for some. In this interview, Wayne made controversial statements on social issues and race relations, casting his membership in the John Birch Society in a clearer light. This revelation also challenges the notion that his westerns, like Stagecoach, were merely harmless entertainment. On race relations, Wayne said,
With a lot of blacks, there's quite a bit of resentment along with their dissent, and possibly rightfully so. But we can't all of a sudden get down on our knees and turn everything over to the leadership of the blacks. I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility.
On the history of America and its relationship to its native peoples, he added,
I don't feel we did wrong in taking this great country away from the Indians. Our so-called stealing of this country from them was just a matter of survival. There were great numbers of people who needed new land, and the Indians were selfishly trying to keep it for themselves.
3 years later, John Wayne gave an interview in front of a camera to better explain his views.
Votes. And I think it's bad for our country, and I am sad to see minorities make so much of themselves as a hyphenated American. I wish they'd all get to thinking that they're Americans as they should, and as they have luckily been born here and couldn't be better off in any other place. there shouldn't be so much whining and bellyaching.
In the late 60s and early 70s, there was a period of considerable change. Civil rights for blacks, equal rights for women. Has this made America a better place?
I am saddened by the fact that although we were a matriarchy, I think we will not be any longer. I think opening doors and tipping your hat to ladies is probably a thing of the past. The forerunners of the women's liberation of today have taken that feeling away from the average American man.
But what about the civil rights? I mean, it's necessary.
What about the civil rights?
Well, we have 20 million blacks on this continent.
Right.
It was necessary to extend rights to them that perhaps for the first 199 years were denied them in this free America.
I guess that they've had a pretty tough break, but not quite as bad as you and your do-gooder friends would have them believe. They live as well here as they live in any other country over that 199 years. True, I think they do have a right to more rights, but it isn't a thing where the rest of the country should feel terribly guilty about anything because they have had a better life here and their fathers and mothers than they would have had any place else. And I want to see them have everything. I don't squawk and cry baby and say, geez, I had to go without meals when I was 16 and 17 years old. It's a terrible thing. I don't think that you should look back and whine and bellyache or try to hold somebody else guilty for everything you did.
In that infamous Playboy interview, Wayne didn't stop with his racial views. He also called Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight's characters in Midnight Cowboy fags for their love of those two men. His outbursts also mentioned American social programs.
I don't think a fella should be able to sit on his backside and receive welfare. I'd like to know why well-educated idiots keep apologizing for lazy and complaining people who think the world owes them a living. I'd like to know why they make excuses for cowards who spit in the faces of the police and then run behind the judicial sob sisters. I can't understand these people who carry placards to save the life of some criminal, yet have no thought for the innocent victim.
It turns out that Wayne had always been extremely non-woke, if you will, which is not surprising. Allegedly, at a party in 1957, he confronted Kirk Douglas about his role as Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh in the film Lust for Life. He was purported to have said,
Christ, Kirk, how can you play a part like that? There's so goddamn few of us left. We gotta play strong, tough characters, not these weak queers.
In 1973, Wayne would be criticized publicly by the iconic Marlon Brando. Appearing on The Dick Cavett Show, Brando argued, "We, Americans, like to see ourselves as perhaps John Wayne sees us, that we are a country that stands for freedom, for rightness, for justice." The Godfather star added, "It just simply doesn't apply."
Did you expect the kind of outrage that you got from people, I believe, that very night, Raquel Welch made a joke against you, saying that I hope the next person doesn't have a cause. Clint Eastwood, yes, of course. I very seldom make mistakes. He did his version of a joke, and then John Wayne looked like he was about ready to get a posse together. He looked so did that surprise you, that they would be angered that you desecrated their cathedral?
I wasn't surprised, no. There were a number of people that felt that Sachin had not been welcomed and not been treated properly, and people that were sympathetic to what she was trying to say. And I received an awful lot of mail in support of that.
The booing made me sore.
Well, actually, I think the people were booing at me. They were booing because they thought, well, this moment is sacrosanct, and you're ruining our fantasy with the intrusion of a little reality. And I suppose it was perhaps unkind of me and to do that, but there was a larger issue, and it's an issue that nobody in the motion picture industry has ever addressed themselves to.
Of course, the legacy of John Wayne is nuanced. Even though he is still regarded as a towering figure in Hollywood history, his reputation has been negatively impacted by his personal beliefs. The clear resistance to mainstream social belief systems that have resulted from his remarks on race and his opposition to important social movements. These issues continue to fuel discussion for some about how we should remember cultural figures who held unsettling beliefs. You may choose to separate the art from the artist, but in Wayne's case, and for obvious reasons, it is rather tricky for some fans. Okay, so some of his views and actions were unsavory to many. Can we uncancel him now anyways?
It never fails to surprise me that there are still vast lands of the United States literally uncultivated.
Well, it won't be this way long. Come the private airplane, people will start spreading around.
Would it be wonderful to be part of the new world?
Well, I don't think it will change as much as some people think.
Oh, but it must.
Why?
For too long, we've had that laissez-faire attitude toward executive operation. We must educate ourselves to share the responsibilities as well as the advantages of citizenship.
Oh, I read that book, too. It certainly made an impression on you, what that writer had to say. But it's a lot of hooey, fixing everybody up when they let out their first squawk, giving them pointers on good government between bottle feedings, and teaching them in school to be good little ladies and gentlemen and not smack each other around.
Oh, it's very easy to make fun of everything.
Listen, Miss Clutch. Have you ever heard of some fellas who first came over to this country? You know what they found? They found a howling wilderness, with summers too hot and winters freezing. Did they have insurance for their old age, for their crops, for their homes? They did not. They looked at the land and the forests and the rivers. They looked at their wives, their kids, and their houses. And then they looked up at the sky and they said, "Thanks, God. We'll take it from here." They were rugged fellas. They were men.
Cancel culture tends to project its hypersensitivity backwards in time to trash the heroes of history, but if our ancestors had adopted woke norms, there would have been no such heroes, and there certainly would have been no America. Had the Mayflower carried a bunch of sensitive snowflakes expecting safe spaces, its passengers would never have taken root in the New World. In fact, Americans have always ventured into spaces that were not safe, because out there, out west, and even out in space, lay exciting new possibilities. In fact, it was always the frontier that, as historian Frederick Jackson Turner argued, defined the difference between the old world and the new. The American experience, its driving force, its optimism, its dynamism, and its entrepreneurial spirit were all about venturing into the unknown. This was also the great promise of American life. Go west, young man. Because unlike Europe, where land was scarce and labor plenty in the great wide American open, you can always start over and find new opportunities. In the frontier, there was also the promise of mobility. In America, unlike Europe, you are not bound by the circumstance of birth. If you dare, you can go as far as your talent will take you. That, at least, was the ideal. And even if it wasn't always the reality, it was nevertheless a lodestar for millions. The idea of safe spaces is the polar opposite of the risk-taking spirit embodied in the idea of the frontier. It is therefore, if we believe Turner, a direct attack on the promise of American life. The American spirit does not run in our blood. It's not in our genes either. It is a product of the way we bring up our young. We now bring up our girls to be daring and to venture into the world, but we teach our boys to hate the very character traits that once propelled them to do the same. This is why the nation's boys are failing. They drop out of schools at a greater rate. They are more prone to addictions and delinquency. Even testosterone levels and sperm counts, studies have found, are on the decline. Teaching boys to hate themselves and to see masculinity itself as toxic rather than honorable will probably not solve their problem. John Wayne, the star of classic westerns like True Grit and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, is in danger of being canceled out of our collective memory, and with him, all that he represented. The University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts removed a John Wayne exhibit from its main building due to derogatory remarks the actor made in a 1971 Playboy interview. The woke crowd has also demanded the John Wayne Airport in Orange County, California be renamed. There's no need to defend inappropriate remarks in order to see the cultural value of Wayne's artistic work. As a society, it's time to draw lines in the sand. We need to unequivocally say this towering figure of American cinema is uncancelable, his legacy irreplaceable in our national memory. If we are to help our children find positive masculine role models, we need to look back in time to when men were men. It is an illusion, and a dangerous one at that, to believe we can do away with toughness, resilience, rugged individualism, and patriotism. Some may want to blame the crisis of manhood in America on patriarchy. Men, the story goes, are unhappy, even driven to suicide, because patriarchal, toxic masculinity has taught them to suppress rather than acknowledge their feelings. But that's not enough of an explanation. The reason for the crisis of masculinity is far more straightforward. Since at least the 1970s, we have been teaching our young that good and evil are gender traits. Masculinity is the toxic evil. Femininity is benevolence. It follows from these assumptions that our men would cure themselves of toxicity the less manly, that is, the more feminine, they become. Self-hate, however, does not create better human beings. Pick any curriculum of gender studies from grade school to graduate university programs, and you will find the same theme. Men are never the soldiers who protected us in war, the firefighters who gave their lives to save the innocent, the construction workers who built our infrastructures. They are always and only the oppressor, the privileged class. John Wayne, born Marion Robert Morrison and referred to as Duke by his friends, wasn't just an actor, he was a teacher of character who embodied what an American man could be, and how honorable a man can aspire to be based on his own character. If we want to get our boys back on track for happy, productive lives, we need to replace the self-hate culture with a new set of stories and role models like John Wayne. It is urgently needed at this time. Our children will never have a second chance at the formative years of their childhood. This is Powerful Primates, and I hope you enjoy this video. Please like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching.